copied intensely these days, because the originals, they're getting few and far between, the originals. They are very, very solid. They're Itchen Ferry, they're a solent boat. You know, everybody knows an Itchen Ferry boat, and there's many people say, oh, I've got an Itchen Ferry, when actually, in fact, it was probably built somewhere entirely different. Itchen Ferry was a village in its own right, and I believe after the First World War, when the men came back from the war, the lucky ones came back from the war, places like Itchen Ferry started to lose their identity, you know, in the mid-20s. So boats that were built, you know, in the late 1800s and right up to, say, 1925, 26 or something, where it was a hive of industry, a place like Itchen Ferry, which is just a village right on the river Itchen by Southampton. And now, of course, it's been absorbed into the city of Southampton. It's actually Itchen Ferry, the village, is right under the toll bridge, if you're familiar with the toll bridge. It's on the opposite side of the river to the city of Southampton, but of course it's now part of Southampton. And I just think people in the area love them. They really do. This boat has been berthed in Cowes, for East Cowes Marina for 3 or 4 years. I had her in Beaulieu for 3 or 4 years. I had her in Deauville in France for 5 years. And she's now based in Lymington. And everywhere she's been, she's the centre of attention, centre of attraction.
How many of this class do you think still survive in this condition?
That is a pretty tough question. I would say in this condition, maybe half a dozen. Itchen Ferries, maybe a dozen. I'm really not sure. I should probably look into that, but there aren't that many. There really aren't. There's as I say, there's lots of yachts around that are made on this model, on this style, and but I love having an original one. I really do. It's although I have done lots of stuff to it that I think on this one, putting a bow thruster on her was a little bit to offending of the purists. But I did this particularly in Deauville as single-handed sailing with a 12-foot bowsprit out there. It's and a long keel and a rudder that you could, you know, get 4 or 5 people standing on the rudder to join you for a drink. It's quite a difficult thing to manoeuvre if the wind's unfavourable, especially coming into a berth. And the bow thruster, I did it actually for a lark, and it's been a godsend. It really has. But I actually don't like bragging about it, and I've just realised I'm talking on a blooming interview telling you one of my secrets. But yeah, that's it. It's got a bow thruster. She's 24 feet on deck, and you know, she's got a straight stem and a straight transom with a rudder that sticks out another metre and a bit from the stern, and then there's the 12-foot bowsprit sticking out from the bow. It's a 17.5 feet massive piece of Douglas fir, and it's 5'5" of the bowsprit inboard, 12 feet of the bowsprit outboard, and it's a beautiful thing at sea with the jib up flying, which goes to the end of the bowsprit. It's an expensive thing to have when you're going into expensive marinas, unless you have to risk giving yourself a hernia by bringing the bowsprit in. It's a heavy job for one person. It's doable. I did it when I was a bit younger. Now I like to have someone to help me bring the bowsprit in. But she's a lovely boat. Her beam is about 8.5 feet, and it's quite roomy. I mean, people are sometimes surprised coming aboard and seeing just how roomy she is, because as I say, 24 feet. I've been on boats 28, 30 feet that don't seem to have as much cabin space as this one. Not great for headroom. Fortunately, I'm built, as they used to say in Scotland, close to the ground, so I can stroll around here without bumping my head too often. But as you found out, you've got to be careful.
And the accommodation?
Yes, that was something that when I bought her, there were 2 forward bunks that used to come to about here, about the limit of the forward end of the coach roof, and I tried sleeping in one once just to see, and it was the most claustrophobic experience I'd ever had on on a boat since the Navy, and I thought if I could make the cabin bigger, that would be by sacrificing those 2 bunks, because I couldn't see anybody really sleeping in them. And that's what we did. So we took the 2 bunks out, we moved this bulkhead forward, and we put a door on it. There was no door before on the forward compartment, and we put a door on it for a little bit more privacy, for that being that's where the heads are located. And I used to keep a life raft and a dinghy in it forward, and it was very well equipped when I was doing a lot more distance sailing, because we used to sail when I had our based in Deauville, we'd go to the Channel Islands quite a lot, Saint-Va, one of my favourite haunts, and Alderney, where I used to go when I was in the Navy on the minesweepers. I loved Alderney. And Alderney, again, you get a lot of attention with an old boat like this. People seem to want to help you when you need a bit of help. Water taxis seem to, at least in Alderney, that used to, we get more attention when we'd call and say, can somebody come and give us a lift back to the shore, onward of Ito? Absolutely. And because I would hear on the same radio lots of other people calling, but they always seem to come out and help us. I don't know. The draft is about 4 feet, and as I say, you're looking, I've had the boat 20 years, so everything that was changed was done 20 years ago. There's been nothing significant done since then. I have to comment on this upholstery. Everybody thinks I've just installed this, last week. This is 20 years old upholstery and it's had everything done to it imaginable. I can't find a scratch anywhere. It's just a lovely thing. I don't want to do a commercial for anybody, but it's called Ultra Leather. It's absolutely outstanding. But it's 20 years old. It's been on here 20 years.
Are you a fanatical cleaner or something?
Isn't this something? This is a recent purchase. I was in Salcombe last week, and I always nip into Trago Mills on the way back to Leamington to see what I can buy. There's a good deals, but I have never seen a tin of brasso this large. And there's a bit of bright work here. That's the reason I bought the big one. Is there's a lot needs doing, and I'm gonna be working on it here in Yarmouth for the next few days. Something else.
You've got enough there for the next few years.
I know. That was £6, only £6. I mean,
that's a bargain even for a Scotsman.
Incredible, God.
Don, there's one thing that's very special and unique about this boat, isn't there?
Well, I think so, yes.
Well, besides you, of course.
Of course.
Would you like to show us?
Certainly. Come forward. Now, I don't know how many of these there are around, but it's in the bronze mode. This is an old baby Blake, which I'm very, very fond of. Spent a bit of time doing her up, and here she is. Bronze. Needs a good bit of work with that large tin of brasso we were looking at earlier, and it will get this tout sweet. But
so where did she come from?
This, I believe she was on the boat in the 40s or 50s. So that would put that this is something like a 60-year-old heads. And I don't know whether I mentioned to you when we met earlier that I had it restored by a guy who runs the chandlery barge in Bursledon and does it as a hobby. And he restored it, and it was so beautiful, pristine. If you can imagine this bronze all cleaned. We lived in an old listed house near Newbury at the time, with loads of oak beams and inglenooks and stuff. And when I picked the thing up from the chandlery barge, I took it home and put it in the corner of the dining room, which was all oak beamed and parquet flooring. And we left it there for a little while. My wife was saying, when are you putting that on the boat? And I said, soon I'll get down there, because there's work being done. And we thought we would leave it in the corner, have friends to dinner, and not mention the fact that it was there. And because it looked absolutely stunning. And the first batch of friends we had there we agreed we wouldn't, my wife and I wouldn't say a word, and we waited for one of them to comment. And it took ages, but someone finally said, what's that doing there? I said, well, this house is really very, very old, and that unit over there is one of the earliest flush toilets domestically. And you see the trouble they went to. Nobody ever mentioned, by the way, at that evening that there was no piping and no tubing or anything. And they were stunned for a while, having had a few wines, of course. But we finally had to admit it was just there because it was on its way to join Onward. But again, after restoration. Bob, you've had the explanation of this, and I'm afraid I'm going to need a little bit of privacy for a moment, if you just excuse me. Thank you. Bob, could you pass that brasso tin in, please?
Can't hear you.
Could you pass that brasso tin in, please? Well, I think I've told you everything of interest, except one thing. Reluctantly, I'm considering selling the boat now after 20 years. The tough part is finding someone who is sensitive enough to look after the boat. It's not just for anyone. It needs someone who's going to look after her. And that's, I do this reluctantly, and who knows, maybe not.